You do good work consistently, and this becomes the problem. The manager who hates employees who think is not reacting to defiance or incompetence. They are reacting to a threat to equilibrium. Thinking employees ask questions that require answers the manager cannot provide without exposing contradictions in how work is actually allocated and evaluated. They notice patterns that reveal the gap between stated priorities and operational reality. They document decisions that later become inconvenient. Most critically, they make reliability contingent on reasonable conditions, rather than offering it unconditionally. The system runs on unreliable people being managed out and reliable people absorbing their work without compensation or boundary. When you think, you see this. When you see this, you stop participating in your own exploitation. The manager experiences this as hostility, because the alternative is recognizing that the department's function depends on treating competence as infinitely elastic. What follows are the specific mechanisms through which institutional structures punish analytical capacity while claiming to value it. Number 1. You make the broken visible. Thinking employees identify dysfunction that management has decided to accommodate rather than fix. A team runs on institutional knowledge held by one person who refuses to document processes. Projects fail predictably because timelines ignore implementation realities that ground-level workers name in every planning meeting. Client expectations are managed through last-minute heroics rather than accurate scoping. These patterns persist because fixing them requires resources, conflict, or admission that current allocation is inadequate. When you think, you name the pattern. You point out that the crisis is scheduled, the failure is designed in, the accommodation is a choice. Management experiences this as creating problems rather than identifying them. The distinction matters to them because solving identified problems requires explaining why the problem was tolerated. Your analysis turns managed dysfunction into acknowledged dysfunction. Acknowledged dysfunction demands response. The institutional incentive is to stop the analysis, not fix the dysfunction. You learn that pattern recognition is only valued when it confirms existing narratives. When it contradicts them, it becomes negativity, poor culture fit, or failure to be a team player. The thinking that would improve operations threatens the stability of having someone to blame when operations fail predictably. Number 2, you refuse plausible deniability. Managers operate in deliberate ambiguity. Instructions are verbal. Expectations shift based on outcome. Priorities are communicated through implication and then clarified retroactively. This is not poor communication. This is strategic flexibility. When something succeeds, the manager directed it. When something fails, the employee misunderstood. The system requires that you accept responsibility without authority and adapt to unstated rules that change based on convenience. Thinking employees document. They send recap emails after verbal instructions. They ask clarifying questions in writing. They create paper trails that establish what was said, when, and by whom. This converts ambiguity into record. The manager can no longer reconstruct events to suit current needs. Decisions have timestamps. Instructions have authors. The employee who thinks has created accountability where the system required its absence. Management experiences this as distrust or hostility, because the alternative is admitting that ambiguity was functional. The documentation is not aggressive. The documentation is evidence that verbal communication was insufficient for the complexity being managed. Refusing that evidence means admitting the insufficiency was deliberate. Managers who hate thinking, employees hate them for making the implicit explicit, the deniable undeniable, the flexible fixed. You stop being a shock absorber for institutional contradiction and become a mirror for it. Number 3, you treat policy as binding. Every workplace has official policies and operational realities. Official policy says requests require 2 weeks' notice. Operational reality demands same-day turnaround. Official policy says overtime is voluntary. Operational reality makes refusing it career-limiting. Official policy says performance determines advancement. Operational reality allocates advancement through relationships built in after-hours socialization. The gap between policy and practice is where exploitation lives. Most employees learn to navigate operational reality and ignore policy. Thinking employees reference policy. They note that the handbook says one thing, while their assignment says another. They ask which applies. This question has no good answer. If policy applies, management must stop making demands the policy prohibits. If policy does not apply, management must admit that employees should ignore written policy in favor of unstated expectations. Either answer reveals that the workplace operates through unwritten rules that favor institutional needs over individual rights. The thinking employee has forced acknowledgement of the dual system. Management hates this because policy exists specifically to be referenced when convenient and ignored when not. Treating it as binding in both directions eliminates the flexibility that makes understaffing and overwork sustainable. You become difficult by expecting the institution to follow its own stated rules. The difficulty is not your behavior. The difficulty is that consistent application of policy would require institutional change. Number 4, you calculate actual cost. Managers present opportunities as benefits. Leading the new initiative provides visibility. Training the replacement builds leadership skills. Taking on additional responsibility demonstrates commitment. Thinking employees calculate cost. Visibility to whom? Producing what outcome? Measured how? Leadership skills that qualify you for what role, with what timeline, at what compensation. Commitment that generates what return beyond additional work. The analysis reveals that opportunities are often work redistribution without compensation. The visibility is to people who will not promote you. The skills are for roles that do not exist or will not be filled internally. The commitment is measured by what you accept, not by what you receive. When you think, you see that the exchange is asymmetric. You are investing time, energy, and personal resources into outcomes that benefit the institution without equivalent benefit to you. Asking about return on investment exposes that the investment is one-directional. Management hates this because the opportunities language obscures the extraction. Framing additional work as career development makes refusal appear short-sighted. Your analysis removes the frame and reveals the ask. The manager must either provide concrete return or admit they are asking you to work more for the same compensation because it benefits them. Neither option allows them to maintain the opportunity narrative while demanding unpaid labor. You have made the cost visible, and visibility converts voluntary sacrifice into negotiable exchange. Number 5, you protect boundary as information. The thinking employee notices what requests reveal about institutional function. Being asked to work weekends indicates understaffing or misallocation, not workload surge. Being assigned work outside your role indicates scope creep or hiring failure, not development opportunity. Being contacted during vacation indicates dependency the institution has chosen not to address, not your indispensability. Each boundary violation is data about how the institution operates and what it considers acceptable to demand. Most employees receive these requests as individual asks requiring individual responses. Thinking employees recognize them as pattern. The pattern reveals institutional dysfunction that management has decided to transfer to you rather than resolve structurally. When you maintain boundaries, you refuse the transfer. The work does not get done by you means the work surfaces as institutional problem, requiring institutional solution. Management experiences boundary maintenance as lack of flexibility, because your flexibility is the solution they have chosen. Hiring adequate staff costs money. Improving processes takes time. Distributing work evenly creates conflict with underperformers they have accommodated. Your willingness to absorb overflow is cheaper and faster than any structural fix. The thinking employee who protects boundaries converts their capacity into information about what the institution is demanding and why. Each refused request is a data point. The data accumulates into a picture of systematic extraction. Management hates thinking employees for treating boundaries as diagnostic tools rather than personal preferences, because diagnosis requires acknowledging what the system is built to do. Number 6, you name the substitution. Managers substitute process for outcome when outcome is not achievable within constraints. You cannot hit the target with available resources, so the target becomes following the process correctly. You cannot deliver quality with the timeline, so quality becomes adherence to checklist. You cannot serve the client well with current tools, so service becomes response time metrics. The substitution allows management to claim success while the actual work fails. Thinking employees notice the substitution. They point out that the process produces the wrong result. The checklist misses the critical elements. The response time metrics ignore resolution. This observation is correct and unacceptable. Management has already decided that the real outcome is not achievable and has chosen to measure something else instead. Your insistence on the real outcome requires them to either admit the goal is unreachable or provide resources to reach it. Neither is preferable to measuring the substitute and declaring victory. The thinking employee refuses to participate in the substitution. They continue to note that the thing being measured is not the thing that matters. This makes them negative, perfectionistic, or unable to appreciate progress. The accusation is technically accurate. You are refusing to appreciate progress toward the wrong target. Management hates this because the substitute metric is how they report upward. Your analysis threatens the entire reporting chain that depends on measuring process, because measuring outcome would reveal failure. You have made it impossible to celebrate hitting metrics while missing goals. Number 7. You enforce reciprocal transparency. Management demands transparency from employees while maintaining opacity about institutional decisions. You report your progress daily. You justify your time. You explain your choices. Meanwhile, budget decisions are confidential. Reorganization plans are need to know. Promotion criteria are subjective. The asymmetry is structural. Your transparency enables management. Their opacity protects flexibility. Thinking employees notice and name the asymmetry. They ask about decision criteria, allocation logic, strategic direction. They request the information they are expected to provide. This is experienced as overstepping. You do not need to know why the budget was cut to absorb the cut. You do not need to understand promotion criteria to do your job. Your questions suggest you believe you are entitled to institutional information that is management's domain. The thinking employee rejects the premise. If management requires your transparency to manage effectively, you require their transparency to work effectively. You cannot allocate effort without knowing priorities. You cannot develop skills without knowing advancement criteria. You cannot assess opportunity cost without understanding institutional direction. Enforcing reciprocal transparency reveals that management wants information flow in one direction, because one-directional flow preserves control. Your questions distribute information that was being hoarded as leverage. Management hates thinking employees for treating information access as reciprocal rather than hierarchical, because hierarchical information control is how decisions get made without input from people who will implement them. You will likely continue working in institutions designed this way. Seeing the mechanisms does not dismantle them. The manager who hates thinking employees operates within incentive structures that reward short-term extraction over long-term sustainability. Your analysis does not change their incentives. What changes is your relationship to your own labor. You stop interpreting institutional dysfunction as personal failure. You recognize that being reliable without boundaries made you exploitable, not valuable. You understand that the difficulty you experience is not your deficiency, but your refusal to absorb cost the institution should carry. This clarity protects you from the primary weapon institutions use against thinking employees, which is convincing you that your analysis is the problem. You see that the system operates as designed. Seeing this is not cynicism. Seeing this is accuracy. The mechanisms persist because they serve institutional needs efficiently. Your recognition does not make you an adversary. Your recognition makes you indigestible to a system that requires you not to notice what it does.